Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of The Pocket. I'm your host, Preston Lang, and alongside me is Parker Knoll.
What's up, guys? Welcome back. We got some fun stuff up for you this week. We'll start with a little bit of news, but then we're getting into some fantasy football myths, things that many of us have heard throughout the years, and whether we think, based on some data that we found, whether you should listen to those myths, whether you should not, maybe a few caveats. It's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting. Starting off with the news, the tush push is not getting banned for the 2026 season. Now, that is relevant for exactly one team and one team only. That would be the Eagles. As a Jalen Hurts dynasty owner myself, I'm pretty pumped about that. They didn't really use it as much last year as I would have hoped, so let's hope the offensive line improves a bit and we see it more and Jalen Hurts gets back to his 15 touchdowns.
I was going to say, Sean Mannion might want to bring it back. I mean, everyone didn't like Kevin Batula, so maybe they'll bring it back.
Kevin Batula was a loser.
And the other bit of news is JSN. He got a big contract, a 4-year, $168.6 million with $120 guaranteed. That's about $42 million per year. That is the number one wide receiver contract of all time. Great for JSN. I mean, he deserves it. Probably means Puka's going to get even more, but just thought we should mention it.
Yeah, Puka, it'll be really interesting. It's just going to keep going up and up. But also, a little bit of a side note here. Make sure you're being careful when you're drafting B. Robinson from the Falcons this year. Just be careful because Brian Robinson Jr. is now a Falcon along with Bijan. So do not draft the wrong B. Robinson.
There's going to be some mistakes, man. It's gonna hurt.
Right. I mean, if you're doing it on an app, the ADPs should separate them, I would imagine. They're not going to be very close. But if you're doing an in-person draft, be careful.
Yeah, always look out.
Yes. All right, jumping into the myths. The first myth that we have decided to tackle is bye weeks don't matter. We've all kind of heard that. People, when you look at your ESPN cheat sheet that you cross off, they always have the bye weeks on there, right? Does it really matter that much? Honestly, no. For me, I'm never going to give up good value or a person that makes my team better because of a bye week. That's not something that I'm really going to take into consideration. Now, the times I would use a bye week, one, let's say there's a tiebreaker. So I really like two players the same. One of them has the same bye week as another player on my team. I'll go with the other one. How often does that happen? Almost never, but it can be done. The only other time that I think you should pay attention to buys, and I ran into this for the first time last year and again this year, some teams or some leagues, some formats do 2-week playoffs. If you do that, you ideally should have your week 2 championship in week 17, which would put the start of your playoffs in week 14. There are NFL buys in week 14. I would probably avoid players with week 14 buys because you want them to play in your playoffs. So that is what I'd be worried about in that instance. Now, in most every other case, I would just be drafting for depth to cover bye weeks. Just something to stay conscious of, but I would never not draft somebody for their bye week.
Yeah, like Parker said, but I personally am not really looking at the bye week when I'm drafting players. If I'm noticing it as I go down my team that I have like a ton of guys, let's say it's like week 7. I know there's some weeks where it's like every team has a bye week. I mean, maybe I take that in consideration for some bench pieces that I'm adding where I view a bunch of guys the same. And it's like, okay, I need a backup for XYZ. It doesn't really matter. But that week 14 playoff, just don't do it. Just don't do the 2-week playoff. But if your league does do that, you do have to be conscious of that. I mean, I was in a super flex league 2 years ago with Jaden Daniels as my quarterback, and they had a week 14 bye, and he was carrying me all year, and it was very frustrating to not have him play in my fantasy football playoffs. So definitely be conscious of that. But yeah,
Perfect.
Moving on, we're going into avoiding bad offenses. Is that a myth or not? Should you do it? Should you not? Does it matter for fantasy? So we took the bottom 12 offenses this year in a bunch of different categories. So bottom 12, so that means out of those categories, you should have 37.5% of the players should come from this category. If it doesn't matter, just because that's how it breaks down, because there's 32 NFL teams. So we took a look at the bottom 12 offenses in total points, and I took the top 36 receivers and the top 24 running backs from this past year. There was 7 top 36 receivers, which is only 19% when we're looking for that 37.5%.
And to clarify, that's of the players, these players that we're listing are from bottom 12 offenses. So 19% of the top 36 wide receivers came from those bottom 12 offenses.
Yes. Sorry. Yeah.
That's that percentage.
Yep. Thank you, Parker. That was. I kind of spewed my words there.
It was good. I just want to make sure we're good.
And of those, that 19%, the lowest on the list was Debo, who finished as the wide receiver 25. So there was no one from wide receiver 26 to 36. So that 19%, like, I guess if you took the top 24, it would be better percentage. But the wide receiver position is deeper, which is why I took 36 versus running backs at 24. Because running backs, once you get past 24, they don't matter as much as receiver because there's not as many starters. But yeah, then the running backs, there was 6 top 24 running backs, which is 25%, again, under that 37.5 point threshold that we're looking for. And that was for total points. So total points seems to affect a lot comparatively for the wide receivers and running backs. So you should be looking to avoid on the total points scale. And it's hard to avoid because you don't necessarily know going into the year who the bottom offenses are, but you can predict and project, and that's what we're looking at here.
Yeah, I think one interesting fact, first of all, when I look at the bottom, or those 6 running backs that finished in the top 24 from bottom 12 total point offenses, one of them is Bijan and one of them is Devon Achane. Those dudes are bona fide studs, and you're going to draft them no matter what. Honestly, I would almost exclude them and say 4 of the top 20. I mean, it's just, you expect Bijan and Achane to finish there and they're studs. So it's hard. I mean, it feels a little bit outlierish for them. So even then, I think this bolsters this even more. I think for me, a fun one is Ashton Jeanty. I feel like people pretty much knew that offense was going to be rough this year. I mean, Geno Smith kind of crapped the bed more than we thought, but he finished as a top.
It's going to be the worst,
right? But he finished as a top 11 guy, but he was getting overdrafted based on that's just something I would be careful with drafting. And I think a lot of people were warning everyone about drafting Jeanty as high as he was going because of his situation. I think that is just an interesting thing from this year.
Yeah, and he was fun, big name, rookie, highly touted.
I mean, he's a stud.
I mean, and I would still say like his RB11 finish still felt like underwhelming as like a Jeanty owner.
Well, he was drafted as what, the 4?
Yeah, four to
5.
6
yeah,
range of running backs, and he underperformed from where you draft him in ADP, even though he finished in the top 12.
Right.
Moving on to the bottom 12 passing yard teams. So this is teams that are bottom 12 in passing yards. There was 9 of the top 24 RBs, which is exactly that 37.5 point threshold. So from this data, it basically says running backs aren't affected by teams that are bad at passing. The bad passing text doesn't really affect running back, which you would think, but at the same time, like pass catching running backs are so important to fantasy, and they're like Achane's on this list. Kenny Gainwell's on this list. Like, there's some guys who like hang their hat on pass catching.
Honestly, this kind of does make a little bit of sense to me because teams who don't have a ton of passing yards, maybe they have a worse quarterback, maybe they don't have enough time in the pocket, maybe their scheme is bad. But in all of those instances, I feel like checkdowns are a higher likelihood, and checkdowns are great for running backs. So that could be the case, but it kind of does make sense. I think for me, the biggest shock here is low teams of passing yards would, in my mind, score less points, and that would impact your players. I think there's less touchdowns for a guy like Achane to go around, which we've kind of experienced. But, I mean, I think it's kind of cool that percentage is exact there.
Yeah, and then moving on to receivers, it's 9 of the top 36, which is 25%, which is lower, but, I mean, it's not even that crazy. Like, it is lower, so you should have dodged. But
I think we would have expected 2 or 3 more bottom 12 offenses to produce a top 36 wide receiver, so significant enough.
Yeah. I mean, you expect that, but when you're talking about just passing yards, that's like the receivers, like all that. So I honestly thought it was going to be weaker than the total points for me, but it wasn't. But it's still weaker, so you should still dodge it. But it was a higher percentage here than the total points, which touchdowns are king. I thought it was interesting though that like Flowers, like he finished at 7 on the Ravens. So the Ravens, I know Lamar was hurt this year, but I don't know if I expect them to be a bottom 12 pass offense again with Lamar healthy, but I guess we'll find out. And then I think the rush yards is really significant here. The bottom 12 offenses in rush yards, there was 6 top 24 backs, 25% again. But CMC is in this list, which is crazy because he was obviously the fantasy RB1 this year. He went crazy. I think it's just because he was so effective through the air,
Yes.
and he was actually very inefficient on the ground.
We did talk about that in an earlier episode when we reviewed CMC's season. He was like a bottom 3 out of the top 24 backs in efficiency in terms of the run game, but he had 1,000 yards on the ground and almost 1,000 in the air with how many touchdowns? I don't remember, 14 or 15. So, he's an outlier here too. This guy's going to perform. If staying healthy, he'll perform on a bottom 1 rushing offense. It's just the kind of player he is. So we're more than likely looking at 5 of 24 in my opinion.
And then you're at 5 of 24 right there. But then you're also at Kenneth Gainwell and Jalen Warren are on this list as well.
Right.
So they're from the same team, and I think we can both agree the Steelers were very weird on offense this year. Kenny Gainwell had more receptions than any receiver, and Jalen Warren was like 1 or 2 underneath the highest receiver on the Steelers. So that feels really outliery. So then you could break it down to like you're at 3 guys, and it's just Jeanty, Chase Brown, and Tony Pollard.
Well, you got to count one of Gainwell or Warren.
Yeah, you do.
So you just double
I guess that's true.
It's 4 teams. 5 teams produced a top 24 back, and CMC's a freak. So it's more 4 teams produced.
Yeah, you're right.
Which is maybe how we should have looked at it again. But yeah, it seems pretty indicative, which makes sense, right? Like if you're not rushing for yards, like that's the running back position is going to thrive most or get their most yards almost always with rushing yards. So that was a pretty interesting one for us too.
Yeah, so that's 25%. But then you would think the receivers should be pretty good here because rushing yards for receivers, it doesn't really matter. But actually it's 22%, which is lower than the passing yards by only 3%, 8 out of the top 36. And we're looking at those guys like Chase. Obviously we talked about Chase Brown, but Jamar Chase was on the list. And he's just a freak. You're going to keep drafting him. But then there's Chase and Higgins are like a repeat again, like we talked about. So bringing back that repeat, but it just feels weird that it's so low on the rushing yards. I would think that it would bump up.
You would think so, yeah.
Like
they're not passing or not running the ball. They're passing the ball.
Right.
So that is interesting.
It was just a shocking thing so just really dodge, like the bottom 12 in rush yards is just like a full dodge in general. Like that's a very big indicator here. And then the bottom 12 in total yards. So this is just total offenses. There was 9 of the top 36 receivers. That's 25%. And then there was 7 top 24 running backs, which is 29%. So the running backs, I feel like total yards is where you're really looking at it. But I would say that in general, this does prove that you should avoid bad offenses. But at the same time, it really feels like instead of taking this study and taking the bottom 12, I should have taken the study at the bottom 5 because that's where it feels like you get they're guys where you're not even seeing teams that have relevant players.
Yeah, it was pretty broad, and it would be interesting to do this. Again, I think bottom 5, bottom 7 offenses, and looking at it again, and then going back a few years would be fun too. But again, the trends from last year, not a single statistic did we finish above expected. Only one time did we finish at expected. So, and again, that it's 1 year of fantasy, so how big of a point is it? But, the fact that every single option finished at or below. One finished at, the rest below. I think that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So it seems like you should be, in my opinion, you should avoid. I think Garrett Wilson is a huge person for me in this. We know about his talent. He's been good for so long, and he's underperformed his ADP every single year. This year was due to injury, but just when the offensive situation is so bad, like Jeanty underperformed this year. Breece Hall underperformed the last 2 years based on his offense. It's just if you're not a bona fide stud, a bad situation can smoke you, and I think they can be ADP traps.
It does feel like you have to be an absolute superstar, and I was thinking about this. The bottom 5 teams were the Raiders. Their only relevant player that was a running back or receiver was Jeanty. You had no relevant receivers. Titans, they had, Wandale and Pollard, so they had 1. Browns had nobody in the top 24 for either position. The Jets had Breece, that's it. And then the Vikings had Jefferson, that's it. So these bottom 5 teams are only producing 1, and then the only team that produced 2 was the Titans. Which
the Titans didn't produce 2. Wandale's wasn't on the Titans last year. He was a Giant.
Oh, yeah. My bad. It's only 1. So literally these bottom, you're right, I'm just thinking that he's on the Titans already. But these teams only produce 1 to 0 fantasy top 24 to top 36 players.
Well, right. The Raiders had Bowers. and
Yeah,
he's going to be good.
If
we're talking about wide receivers and running backs,
Yeah,
and the Browns had Fannin as well. So we didn't look at tight ends here, but in terms of wide receiver and running back, which I feel like tight end you can kind of get away with a worse offense more or less because they just run shorter routes. It is less. It would be interesting to run this on tight ends as well.
It's just crazy to me that you look at those bottom fives and there's one player per team, so it's just like projecting that I would just not want to be a part of those guys. I mean, Michael Wilson and Kenneth Gainwell, those were guys you didn't even like know about that were like good on this list. So I think you should totally like try to predict the bottom five and just totally dodge players because I would like Judkins is a player that people really like, and I think the Browns are going to be bottom five on offense again. Like they're not going to figure it out at quarterback. I mean, their O-line, they just lost at like half their O-line to free agency. And everyone loves Judkins. I think I'm personally going to be out on Judkins for next year in redraft.
I think I'm feeling the same way about Harold Fannin as well. I know people are putting Harold Fannin up there next to Warren and Loveland. Dude, I'm so scared to draft a Brown, and this shows you why.
Yeah.
Or a reason why. It's like if your team can't move the ball, how are you going to score points? How are you going to get yards? Fannin and Judkins are both excellent talents, but if they can't get the ball in good situations, what good does it do them?
Right.
So
like you said, Garrett Wilson with the Jets, but I don't see the Jets getting much better either. So, Brees, I'm probably dodging Brees as well.
100%. Yeah, I was so excited to see Brees leaving the offseason for him going back to the Jets. I would fully expect with Geno Smith at the helm, I fully expect the Jets to be bottom five, and I will not touch a Jet this year. I won't do it.
It's going to be a bummer when one of these rookie wide receivers goes to the Browns or the Jets, and it's just going to be...
It's going to be unfortunate.
It's going to be
a bummer.
It's going to be because you're going to want to draft them because they're going to be the new hotness, but probably should dodge them.
Probably should. 100%.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on to our next myth. Should you spend your FAAB early? This one's kind of fun. So for those of you oh my, that was brutal. For those of you who don't know, we're getting there.
Like me.
I actually don't know how to speak English. For those of you who don't know, FAAB stands for Free Agency Acquisition Budget. So for waiver wire pickups, you are given a set amount, so usually $100 for the whole season, and you get to bid weekly on how much of your FAAB you would like to spend on a player, and if you bid the most, you win that player. So instead of doing a waiver priority, you get to spend money, and it gives everybody a fair shot of getting players. We actually started using it this year. I thought it was a ton of fun. But I've heard a few times since doing some research on it that you should spend your FAAB early because the best waiver wire pickups are going to break out in the first 1 to 3 weeks. That's what we consider early, is 1 to 3 weeks. So I'm going to dive into the waiver wires this year, and then we'll go back a few years and see what that kind of looks like. So this year, as far as relevant running backs go that were waiver wire pickups, we have Kenneth Gainwell, Rico Dowdle, Woody Marks, Kaimani Vidal. Kenneth Gainwell, all four of these guys were relevant week 5 to week 6. That's about when they were picked up on waivers and they started producing on teams. Kenneth Gainwell finished as the 16th, or running back 16. Rico finished 18. Woody Marks finished 29. Vidal finished 42. Obviously not all great. Most of these guys broke out with injury. Nothing too crazy to see here. They were good fillers while their headbacks were out. As far as wide receiver goes, we have Michael Wilson, Wan'Dale Robinson, Parker Washington, Alec Pierce. Michael Wilson broke out week 11, he was picked up around week 11. Parker Washington was around week 11. Alec Pierce was that 8 to 9 week mark. Wan'Dale Robinson was 2 to 3. So he was an early pickup. Of the first 8 people we've talked about, he's been the first early pickup. Michael Wilson finished as the 10th wide receiver. Wan'Dale finished 14th. Parker Washington finished 33rd. And Alec Pierce finished 27th. So based on those numbers, Wan'Dale was the only one early, and was he really worth a ton of free agency acquisition budget? Probably not. So for running backs and wide receivers, we haven't really had anybody worth spending all your FAAB early. Let's go to quarterbacks. Matthew Stafford, he broke out week 4 to 5. Trevor Lawrence, 15 to 16. Jackson Dart got his first start in 4, so 4 to 5, maybe 6. And Jacoby Brissett was kind of starting in week 6, but he was a waiver pickup almost through week 11, 12. People just continued to not pick him up. Matthew Stafford finished as the third quarterback 3. Trevor Lawrence finished 4th. Jackson Dart finished 13th. Jacoby Brissett finished 6th. So Matthew Stafford, you could argue he was early, but he was after that 3-week mark. So we had a few good pickups in there, but again, nothing early. So to spend all your free agency acquisition budget in the first 3 weeks, you'd have missed out on those guys. And then tight ends, we have Harold Fannin, who broke out week 1. Juwan Johnson broke out week 1. And Gadsden was like 6 to 8. Fannin finished as the 6th tight end, Juwan as the 8th, and Gadsden as the 15th. So Fannin and Juwan were worth a decent amount of FAAB, but are you going to spend all of your FAAB on a tight end? Probably not. The biggest tells for me are running backs and wide receivers. We'll get into it. So if we just throw out 2025, if you used all your FAAB early, you probably screwed yourself. There was a lot of players who broke out later due to injuries or maybe some situation changes. Somebody like Stafford, like the offense just kind of kicked in a little late. Trevor Lawrence, magic. Jackson Dart got his chance. Jacoby Brissett got his chance. So if we're just looking at 2025, I would say no, don't spend your FAAB early. Obviously, 2025 is not the only point the point that we can look at. I'm going to list some players that have been high priority waivers in years past. 2024 was Baker, Mayfield, and Sam Darnold. They both broke out the first 3 weeks. Baker finished as quarterback 4. Sam Darnold finished as quarterback 9. In 2023, you had Puka Nacua, Kyron Williams, Nico Collins, CJ Stroud, and Jordan Love. All 5 of those before week 3. Puka was the 4th wide receiver, Kyron, 7th running back, Nico, 12th receiver, Stroud, 9th quarterback, Jordan Love, 5th quarterback. Okay? Bunch of studs early on. Geno Smith in 2022, he broke out in week 3. He was the 5th quarterback. Justin Fields, weeks 8 through 9. So he was a late guy, and he was the 6th quarterback. So we have talked about how many guys? 1, 2, 7, 9. We've talked about 9 pickups so far up and through 2022, and Justin Fields is now the first one that didn't break out in the first 3 weeks. Let's go to 2021. We had Elijah Mitchell. He broke out first 3 weeks. He only played 11 games, and he was the 26th running back, but when he was playing, he was gross. We have Amon-Ra, who broke out late. He was wide receiver 21, but he broke out late. Of course, we have another one. And then Cordero Patterson finishes RB2. He broke out early. Let's go to 2020. Justin Jefferson broke out week 3. He broke out week 3, and he finished as wide receiver 6. Justin Herbert broke out week 2. He finished as the quarterback 9. And we had James Robinson, who broke out in week 2, and he was the RB7. So if we look at all of those players who all finished substantially higher than any waiver wire pickup we had this year, they were all early except for Justin Fields and Amon-Ra. So in years past, when we see like a high-end stud appear on the waiver wires or somebody who truly broke out and carried you throughout your seasons, they were early. So in pretty much all of these years, you'd think spending your FAAB early is correct. Now, it's not quite that simple. A guy like Baker Mayfield, a guy like Sam Darnold, Baker was the 4th quarterback, so he was pretty worth it. Sam Darnold, I don't know. But are you going to spend all of your FAAB on a quarterback? Probably not. You probably shouldn't do that. It's just, Superflex League maybe. But apart from that, probably not. A guy like Puka was worth it. A guy like Kyron was worth it. A guy like Nico was worth it. And I would argue Jordan Love 5th was fairly worth it. CJ Stroud at 9, not really worth it. Geno Smith at 5, yeah, kind of worth it. Justin Fields was 6th, but he was insane down the stretch, so fairly worth it. But again, he broke out late. Elijah Mitchell, not worth it. He played 11 games. Amon-Ra, again, you're not going to spend, he was late, so he doesn't apply. Cordero Patterson, worth it. Justin Jefferson, worth it. Justin Herbert, I would argue the 9th overall quarterback, not worth it. And James Robinson was worth it. So if you're going to find a stud on the waiver wires, in my conclusion from this, you're going to find them in the first 3 weeks. Now, does that mean you should spend all of your acquisition budget immediately? No. I think you should save some just for that change of situation, the injuries. The other thing that you can kind of take into consideration is rookies. They're going to develop later in the season. That's pretty normal, but they're usually drafted anyway. So, there's not a direct, clear answer. Yes, you should spend all your FAAB early, but the trends in terms of the best value or the best waiver wire pickups, they're going to be early. So look in the first 3 weeks to find those breakouts and spend your FAAB early. But I would still save 10, 20% for players later on.
Yeah, basically what we're saying is, like Parker said, if you want that stud that's going to help your team for a long time, getting them early helps because they can play for you right away, and it's easier to find guys early. But in years like this, you found the guys that were going to carry you in the mid-week. So that strategy would not have worked this year. In where years past, it has worked. So kind of an outlier year. But spending, like Parker said, save 20%. I would say save 20%. I think if you're spending 80%, like you can easily miss on a guy too, where then
100%.
you're hurting. Like, I mean, I know in the 2023 year, Kenneth Gainwell was like a priority pickup, and early on, everyone thought he was going to take over the backfield, and people spent money on him, and it didn't work out. So spending on, like, you don't 100% know who the guy is going to be. So take your shots early on, but you don't want to blow all your fab on one guy that doesn't work out for you.
Right. And one thing that, like Preston kind of mentioned, this data doesn't show is how many of people were high priority ads in these years that were misses. We see kind of that with 2025. I had all that data. But from years past, like again, in 2023, Kenneth Gainwell, I wasn't doing fab. I was doing waiver priority. I was towards the top. I picked up Kenneth Gainwell instead of Puka. And I was pretty sad about that. And so that's going to happen. So, like, yeah, it's a little bit higher risk, higher reward in the beginning. And I think Preston summed it up well. I think the mix of 2025 and years past show you, yeah, if you want to spend your budget to get studs in the beginning, but there are plenty of players who are going to give you fantasy relevance. Now, are they going to finish as a top, wide receiver 1, RB1? No, probably not. But they'll give you relevance down the stretch. Michael Wilson didn't finish 10th, but a guy like that, he finished as like a stud down the stretch. And if you spent all your budget, you missed out on like a league winner like Michael Wilson.
Yeah. And then moving on, we're going to talk about a dynasty point where some people in dynasty say dynasty running backs don't matter. We're here to break that down and see if that's true or not. So basically what I did is I took the top 12 running backs, their point average from the last 5 years. So I took the top 12 and I added all their points together and I averaged them out. So from 2025, they had 278 was the average for a top 12 running back. Obviously, it can get affected based on CMC goes for over 400, and then the bottom guys are lower. But it's still the average of the top 12. 2024 was the highest year of them all at 295. Very good year for running backs in 2024. Then there was 268, 280, 271, all the way down to 2021. So this averages out over the last 5 years, a top 12 running back, they average 278 points together. That being said, I also did it for the top 12 receivers because that's what people always compare, running backs and receivers in Dynasty. The top 12 receivers averages over the last 5 years were 273. So this year, running backs would have been their higher average. 282, so the running backs in 2024 had a higher average. 2023, 300, so then the receivers would take that. 2022, 289, and then 2021, 302. Both those years, the receivers averaged more points than the running backs in the top 12. So that would be a total for the running backs per year over the last 5 years was 278, and the wide receivers was 289. So the wide receivers, yes, are scoring more fantasy points, but that's only 11 total points difference when you're taking the top 12 from each position and then averaging it out. So wide receivers, yes, on average are scoring more fantasy points, but to say running backs don't matter when you're looking at this, from year to year, running backs definitely do matter. And that goes into my next point, and the next piece of data I looked at is then the RB turnover year to year and the wide receiver turnover year to year, because in Dynasty, obviously, you keep the players, so we just pointed out that it's fairly close year to year on how many of the top running backs and the receivers are getting you in for points. So that turnover really matters because if a guy is finishing top 12 every year, if the receivers are more consistent or the running backs are more consistent, you're going to want the more consistency. So the RB turnover per year, so I looked at lists of the top 12 guys from 2021 to 2022. On that list, there was 5 guys who finished in 2021 top 12, and they also finished top 12 in 2022. In 2022, there was 3 guys that finished top 12 in 2022 and 2023. And then so forth. 6.5, I said 6.5 because Barkley was 13, so I didn't include him, but I gave him a half, so 6. And then from 2024 to 2025 was 8.5. Jacobs was also 13 from the year prior, so we'll count it as 8. So on average over the last 5 years, 5.5 running backs repeat as top 12 running backs per year. Now the wide receivers, it was 5.5 from 21 to 22. You guys get the gist. Waddle was 13. Anyway, 7, 2, 4. Basically, it's 5.5 receivers repeat as top 12 every year. Which
4.5.
4.5. I misread it.
You're right.
So about one more running back per year is going to finish inside the top 12 versus receiver. I thought this was shocking because I always thought receivers were much more consistent. I mean, you hear about guys like Amon-Ra, who's been the past 3 straight years. So this shows me that running backs should, because in Dynasty you want to look at it as a 2 to 3 year window. That's what everyone says. I mean, if you look up anything, you know anything about Dynasty, that's what everyone says. So when you're looking at a 2 to 3 year window, man, running backs and wide receivers are looking very close. And this is the top 12 guys, but they look very close in my opinion in value.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of interesting because if we're talking about the top 12 players and then you're looking at a fantasy football mock draft, like a startup dynasty mock draft, you're drafting, I don't know, 4 or 5 receivers before you're touching Bijan. And I'm easily taking Bijan. In a redraft, I'm taking Bijan before all of them. Like, I'm taking Bijan 1-1 next year. But in Dynasty, we're taking Jamar Chase, we're taking JSN, we're taking Puka, we're taking CeeDee Lamb, Amon. And now I'm not saying everybody's doing that, but ADP shows that some of those receivers are up there. And we just kind of looked at it, and in that 3-year span, it doesn't look like it looks like you should be drafting Bijan, or they should be neck and neck. So I think that's kind of interesting. I think that also tells you that you're going to be getting better value later in drafts. Not later in drafts, better value in the 2nd or 3rd round drafting a running back. So if you're picking a guy like, I don't know, Ashton Jeanty at the beginning of the 3rd round, but instead you're picking Ladd McConkey because receivers are going early, like you're going to take that value at Ashton Jeanty. You shouldn't be panicking like, oh, I need receivers because they're going. You're getting great value. You're going to get great value in those like 2, 3, 4 rounds for running back. And that's, at least for some of the mock drafts that I've been doing, the ADP is giving that value, which I think is kind of silly. Now, more receivers play per team, so there's going to be more fantasy relevant receivers. So once you start getting into the 5th, 6th, 7th round, receivers are just going to hold value better at that point because there's just less fantasy relevant running backs. It's just the nature of the position. But when we look at the top 12s, the studs, it seems to be about the same.
Yeah. So what I'm saying there is those top running backs should be held in value as the same as those top wide receivers. Now, as you go down the list where you're getting into RB20, right, versus the wide receiver 20, you're going to be wanting to take, like, the receiver means more to you because, yes, the shelf life is longer, but also, like Parker said, the position's just deeper, so you're going to need more receivers. The wide receiver 30 is way more valuable than the running back 30 most of the time. So you're going to want to still be drafting a lot of get a lot of receivers. Like, if you've gone running back, like, you don't need to be like, oh, man, I need to keep hammering running backs. You still need a lot of receivers. I advise if you're going in the first 6 rounds of your dynasty draft to take 3 receivers. That'd be great because you want more receivers. But those running backs, like where you're talking about Bijan versus Jamar Chase to me is very close. Like, I think those guys, you could take Jamar, you could take Bijan, where I think a lot of people view like, oh, you should take Jamar Chase, you should take JSN, you should take Puka. I think you're not crazy if you take Bijan. Not saying you have to take Bijan, but in this thing, people say RBs don't matter. And I'm here to tell you that they do matter. I care about running backs in Dynasty, and I think you should too. Running backs year to year are going to help you win championships. Like Parker said, he would take Bijan at the 101 in redraft this year. Well, what are you doing in Dynasty? You're trying to win a championship. So when you think, oh, I would take Bijan at the 101, well, then he's the guy I would take because I don't project Bijan to be bad in 2 to 3 years.
Right. And, there is a little bit of science to why receivers are valued more than running backs. If you look outside that 2 to 3 year window, like, let's say I like Jamar Chase and Bijan equally in that 2 to 3 year window. But if I'm looking at who's more likely to be performing for me or hold value, per se, 4 to 5 years down the road, it's Jamar Chase, and that's why I can see why you'd be giving the benefit to JSN, Puka, and Jamar Chase. So that I do understand, and that's why I would be drafting those 3 receivers over Bijan. But I'm far less scared to pick Bijan up by those guys than I feel like ADP indicates.
Yeah, that's when you get into the production versus value standpoint too, where that running back can be producing for you, but everyone, like, the running back age cliff is 27 to 28, so people panic like their running backs are dead. Like I don't want them. So you won't be able to trade them for value, even though they're producing for you, which in Dynasty is really hard to. It's really hard to have an asset that you're like, man, I can't move him. He just has to be on my team. So you can't like pick your direction of where you want to go. So like receivers just feel more vital when
They're safer.
Yeah, they're safer because a 27-year-old receiver, that's a prime receiver. Oh, they could play for me for
3
5
more,
years.
yeah.
3 more years easily. So it's you have more time to do stuff with them versus like a running back. You're kind of gotta keep the wheels turning and get it going.
All right. Well, that is all the myths that we had for you today. We hope you guys learned something. Again, we've been playing fantasy for quite a few years, and these are all things that we've heard while playing. So we really wanted to dig in, find some data, see what that looked like, and report back to you guys. Hopefully help you guys avoid some traps or maybe confirm the beliefs that you had. So I hope you guys enjoy this episode. Continue to stay tuned. We'll be locked in all off season and keep bringing you guys fun fantasy stuff.
Yeah, have a good week.